And so it was, late in the 20th century, that a pox fell upon the land, a plague of home videos that were limited in intelligence. There was brain drain, and terminal boredom swept the countryside. The maker looked down and was not pleased by what he saw, and said, "This is not good." And so it was, he brought forth Genesis, a system with twice the power, twice the intelligence, twice the challenge, twice the fun. Only a chosen few were called forth to experience this new dimension of high-definition graphics and stereo sound. And the maker saw what he had done and said, "Now that's not bad." Discover Genesis, and your world will never be the same.
Welcome to the Poor Man's Retro Game Room, and today we're going to talk about the Sega Genesis. It's been a while. I am a Sega guy. I'm on Team Sega. Was back in the day, still am today. So today we're going to kind of get back to my roots, to my gaming roots, and we're going to talk about the launch of the Sega Genesis. Man, I just have such fond memories of the launch. I actually was able to pick the Sega Genesis up on launch and bring it home and play it, and I'm telling you, it was a remarkable experience. First of all, I live in a small town, so I had to travel outside. I traveled about 150 miles one way to pick up my Sega Genesis back in the day, and I do remember going into the store, finding it, picking it up, and I also picked up one game, and that was John Madden Football. So I picked up John Madden, and I asked my wife to drive home, and the whole way home I just was looking at that box. I read the front of the box, the back of the box. Man, there was so much anticipation to get home, open that thing up, pull it out, and plug it into my TV, and play some Altered Beast and some John Madden Football. It was probably a very long, excruciatingly long ride home. But when I did get home, it was awesome, man. I opened up the Sega Genesis, and I just remember the styrofoam, and it had the styrofoam lid, and I popped it off. I'm going to show some footage of me unboxing the Sega Genesis. I did an unboxing video just a few years ago on the channel, so I'm going to show you a little bit of that. Of course, the first time when I first brought it home, it was amazing, and unboxing it today, it's not quite the same, but it's still pretty cool, and it brings back a lot of memories. But yeah, that big styrofoam tray that it set in, the box, the lid of that styrofoam just popped right off, and there it was, in all of its glory, a black Sega Genesis. And the console just looked awesome, man. Looked great, had that headphone jack in the front of the console with the volume control and everything. And just as far as aesthetics, man, you cannot beat the Sega Genesis. It looks so good. The Model 1, and you know what, the Model 2 looks good too, but the Model 1 has more character, of course, and it has a little more meaning to me than the Model 2, but man, it was awesome. And just pulling it out, reading some of the instructions, getting it connected, and first time grabbing that, it looked like a Batman Batarang, man, the controller, big black controller with 3 buttons with red print on it. Oh man, it was cool. It was awesome. And just the first time playing it was so amazing. So, you know what, one of the other things that I wanted to do with this video is I want to get some of your input. Did you have the Sega Genesis on launch? And if you did, give me some of the memories, or at least give me the memories that you had the first time you played a Sega Genesis, or purchased one, brought one home. Man, put it in the comments. I know anybody watching this video would love to read them as well. So yeah. So what I wanted to do today was just to kind of remember the Sega Genesis and the launch of the Genesis, was look at the first 5 games that I can remember anyway, to the best of my memory, playing on my Sega Genesis, and having that first year or so when I had the console. And of course, you know, back then, sports games were big, and the Sega Genesis did a few things really, really well, and that was shooters and sports games, man. It was faster than the Super NES, even though the Super NES launched after the Sega Genesis. You know, it was just an amazing experience. And so today we're going to look at the first 5 games that I've played on my Sega Genesis. And yeah, let's have a good time. Let's remember the Sega Genesis. And give me some of that input in the comments section as well. So let's get started.
Rise from your grave.
Is there anything more iconic than that rise from your grave? First time plugging in the Genesis and firing up Altered Beast was just amazing. It did feel like having an arcade game right in your home. And the sounds were there. You know, no, it's not a one-to-one conversion, of course not. There's some details that were missed, and you know, it is a little different than the arcade, but man, it was close, and back then it was really close. And just to see those big sprites on screen, the big characters, and this awesome arcade game that I played at our local Pizza Hut, and in the arcade, playing on your TV was just amazing. And you know, a lot of people maybe didn't like Altered Beast back then, and at the time, it was a good pack-in game. It had co-op, showed you what the system could do. It was a very short game and could be beaten very quickly, but I think was a good launch game for the Sega Genesis. Another great arcade port to the Sega Genesis. Man, I remember playing this and pumping quarters into this machine. And I went to pick up another Sega Genesis game, and there wasn't a whole lot of Sega Genesis games out there at the time. But Strider was sitting there on the shelf, and when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, no doubt, Strider's coming home, man. And when I got it home, you know, I was not disappointed. There was so many times back in the early days, like on the NES, or even sometimes on the Genesis later on, where you would buy a game that was an arcade port, and you'd get it home and just be so disappointed in it. Well, Strider was not that way at all. This was the best way to play Strider on a home console for a very long time. It's an excellent, excellent port. Gets everything right, and it was just amazing back in the day to have this game at home and have people over, and you could show them, hey, you know, this is what the Sega Genesis can do. This is what it's all about. So yeah, I hit a home run when I purchased Strider, and it does not disappoint. What a great game. Man, I know a lot of people don't like retro sports games, but I'll tell you what, back in the day, John Madden football was an amazing experience. And like I said earlier, the Sega Genesis did sports games so well, and it was such a big part of the success of the Sega Genesis. Man, we played the heck out of John Madden football. Me and my cousins and my nephew. I was not disappointed. I loved John Madden football, and in my opinion, this is still the best John Madden football that you can play, you know, before EA just kind of copied and pasted stuff and really didn't put a lot of effort into their football games. So the original John Madden football, awesome experience on the Sega Genesis. So when I purchased E-SWAT for the Genesis, I had never played it in the arcade. It is based on an arcade game, but it is a bit different, and I actually was able to play it later on in an arcade. And I like the Genesis version. Maybe that's I like it better. Maybe that's because I played it first on the Sega Genesis. I don't know. But it's an amazing game. I do remember bringing it home, and I had the day off and just sat and played E-SWAT for about 3 or 4 hours, and just really fell in love with the game. You know, starting off the game and just kind of with no suit, no real special powers with your pea shooter, and then gaining that suit and all your special weapons was amazing. E-SWAT is a great game. And of course, another arcade port, but this one was completely reprogrammed for the Sega Genesis, and it was amazing to play this game back in the day when you put that cartridge in, fire it up, and hear that music coming out of your TV. And you know, it's not a perfect one-to-one port, of course, like, you know, none of them were. But man, it was just done so well on the Sega Genesis, and it is my actual favorite version of Ghouls and Ghosts. It might be a little bit easier than some of the other ones. Of course, it's easier than Super Ghouls and Ghosts on the Super NES, and it's maybe a little more accessible, but it's just a lot of fun. It's still very difficult, but man, it was so fun to play back in the day. And I mean, you got to where you just memorized, you know, everything, and it just became muscle memory because I played it so many times. But what an awesome game, and a great game to play on Halloween. But it doesn't have to be Halloween to play Ghouls and Ghosts on the Sega Genesis and have a good time. One of my fondest memories, Ghouls and Ghosts back in the day on the Sega Genesis. Hey, thanks for watching this video, and thank you for making it to the end, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd really love to hear from you. What are some of your memories of the Sega Genesis? Maybe you didn't get one till later in life. Tell me your memories and your experience the first time playing the Sega Genesis. I think it'd be really cool to read those comments, and I'm sure everybody would love to read them. So anyway, thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does.
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free.
Genesis does.
What Nintendo don't.